When people speak about Berserk, they usually speak about violence, blood, tragedy, and brutality. But that is only the outer shell. Violence is not the message, tragedy is not the core, brutality is not the point. If we look carefully, slowly, what truly pulses at the center of Berserk is a question about existence. And that question is carried almost entirely by one character. Guts, not as a hero, not as a villain, not even as a symbol of rage, but as a human being trapped in a continuous internal conflict. Guts does not move forward because he believes in tomorrow. He moves forward because he does not know who he becomes when he stops. Existence without guarantees. Guts' life begins in a place where meaning should not exist, a battlefield filled with corpses. From his first breath, the world teaches him something most people never have to learn so early. Existence is fragile, not promised, not protected, not fair. To exist is not a passive state, it is something that must be maintained. Every step Guts takes later in life echoes this truth. His battles are not quests for glory, they are not driven by dreams of victory, they are acts of ontological resistance. I exist, I am still here, I have not vanished. This is what every swing of his sword is truly saying. Identity forged under threat to the outside world, Guts looks like someone obsessed with strength. But strength for him is not ambition, it is insurance. From childhood, he learns that closeness leads to loss, that trust invites pain, that dependence creates vulnerability, and vulnerability is punished. So his mind adapts, not in healthy ways, in necessary ways. A simple internal logic forms: if I do not attach, I cannot lose. If I do not lower my guard, I cannot be wounded. If I keep moving, I do not have to feel. This is not philosophy, this is survival psychology. The enormous sword he carries is not just metal and weight, it is emotional distance made visible. It keeps others away, it keeps intimacy at bay. It turns pain into something external, something he can swing, instead of something he must sit with. Persistence, born from fear, not hope. One of the most uncomfortable truths about Guts is this: he does not believe things will get better. He does not believe fate can be defeated. He does not believe suffering has a reward. And still, he continues. Why? Because his persistence does not come from hope. It comes from terror, the terror of stopping. Stopping would mean feeling grief he never allowed himself to mourn, facing a loneliness he numbed through motion, hearing the inner child who was never protected, sitting with the question he avoids at all costs: who am I without the fight? Continuing is not bravery, it is a functional escape, not cowardice, but the only way he knows how to remain intact. Pain as an internal environment. For many characters, pain is an obstacle. For Guts, pain is architecture. It structures his thoughts, shapes his posture, defines his rhythm. He does not ask, how do I stop suffering? He asks silently, how do I function inside suffering? This mirrors a very real psychological phenomenon. When pain is constant, it stops being an event and becomes a climate. You don't escape it, you adapt to it, and adaptation is not healing. Defense mechanisms disguised as strength. Guts builds his psyche the same way he built his body, by hardening, by closing off, by tolerating far more than any human should. Anger becomes fuel, isolation becomes discipline, trauma becomes structure, but this resilience comes with a hidden cost. The more he endures, the less he feels, and the less he feels, the farther he drifts from himself. This is the real war of Berserk, not humans versus monsters, but survival versus humanity. The question. Berserk asks the viewer. Berserk never shouts its message. It whispers. And in that whisper it asks, how many times did you continue? Not because you were strong, but because you didn't know who you would be if you stopped. Guts represents those who had no luxury of choice. Those who didn't fight for dreams, but because fighting became the only identity left. Strength without witnesses. Guts' true strength is not found in his sword, not in his victories, not even in his rage. It exists in something quieter, the ability to continue existing when no one is watching, when there is no reward, when there is no applause, when everything inside demands rest. He is not the story of conquering pain, he is the story of coexisting with it without disappearing, and perhaps that is the most human form of strength. The body remembers what the mind cannot. One of Berserk's most subtle truths is this. Guts' body reacts before his thoughts. Scars are not decoration. They are memory stored in flesh. When trauma begins early, the body learns faster than awareness, not to relax, not to trust, not to let go. That is why Guts never truly rests. Even sleep is vigilance. Even stillness is readiness. This is not courage. It is conditioning. Solitude. As learned safety, Guts does not choose solitude out of pride. He chooses it because experience taught him that closeness costs too much. Each time he trusted, something was taken. Each time he reached out, something was lost. So the mind creates a rule. If I walk alone, I won't have to grieve anyone. But protection has a price. Over time, loneliness stops being a state and becomes an identity. He is no longer someone who is alone. He becomes someone designed to be alone. Anger, a psychological glue. Guts' anger is not chaos, it is organization. Anger gives him direction when meaning collapses, focus when memory threatens to flood in. In real psychology, intense emotions often act as anchors when the self is at risk of fragmentation. Anger keeps him moving, and movement means existence. Without anger, silence would arrive, and silence would bring everything he buried. The sword as excess. The massive sword does not symbolize power. It symbolizes excess. Too much pain, too much weight, too much responsibility. It demands constant effort, no distraction, no softness, just like his life. When carrying weight becomes normal, its absence feels dangerous. That is why he cannot put the sword down. Without it, he would face emptiness. Persistence. Without belief, perhaps the most devastating truth of Berserk is this. Guts continues without believing, no promises, no faith, no happy endings, and still he walks. This is persistence stripped of romance, not hope-driven, but existence-driven. As long as I'm moving, I'm still someone. Stopping does not mean rest. It means confrontation with grief, guilt, powerlessness, and the child who was never saved. Humanity that refuses to die. Despite everything, something inside Guts resists extinction. Small acts of care, shared silences, moments of gentleness that happen almost by accident. These moments don't weaken him, they terrify him. Because feeling again means risking loss again. And yet, he feels. This reveals something essential. Trauma does not erase humanity. It hides it. Berserk is not escapism. Berserk is uncomfortable because it refuses to comfort. It asks, what do you do when life offers no meaning? Who are you when continuing is the only option? When does strength become just adaptation to pain? And the hardest question of all, are you living or only surviving well enough not to collapse? Ugly strength is not always noble. Sometimes it is exhausted. Sometimes it is lonely. Sometimes it is invisible. Sometimes strength is simply waking up and continuing without witnesses. That is why Berserk feels so human. When persistence becomes identity at some point, Guts no longer fights for something. He fights as someone. Persistence stops being a choice. It becomes identity. I am the one who continues. And that is dangerous. When pain shapes identity, quitting feels like annihilation. He does not fight because he loves violence. He fights because struggle became the only language of existence he knows. The fear of silence, more than monsters, Guts fears silence. Silence creates space. Space invites memory. Memory brings unprocessed grief. As long as there is motion, there is no reflection. As long as there is battle, there is no mourning. This is instinctive survival psychology. Discipline as anesthesia, Guts' extreme self-control is not balance. It is fear. Fear of losing control. Feeling too much, breaking internally. Discipline organizes chaos, but also hardens the soul. The more disciplined he becomes, the less room there is for vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like danger. The tragedy of care. One of Guts' deepest wounds is his inability to receive care. When someone approaches, his body reacts first. Tension, suspicion, withdrawal. For someone raised without protection, care feels foreign. Accepting help would mean admitting need. And need opens a wound he spent his life sealing. Two forces inside him. Inside Guts, two forces collide. One wants to harden completely. One insists on feeling even if it hurts. Hardness protects. Humanity wounds. But humanity is what gives meaning. This conflict is universal. How many people harden to survive and later forget how to soften without pain? Survival. Without reward. Even after everything, Guts never feels enough. Not strong enough. Not deserving of rest. Because survival never brought safety, the mind learns, if I stop, something bad will happen. So he never stops. Forced strength. There is a difference between chosen strength and imposed strength. Guts never chose to be strong. He was placed in situations where breaking meant death. His persistence is not heroism, it is last resort. Why Berserk speaks to adults, Berserk speaks especially to exhausted adults. People who keep working while empty, keep smiling while numb, keep being strong because no one else will. Guts doesn't inspire because he wins. He inspires because he doesn't disappear. Sometimes continuing is all someone can do, and sometimes that is enough. Perhaps strength is not defeating darkness. Perhaps it is walking inside it without letting it erase everything you are. Perhaps persistence is not believing things will work out, but refusing to vanish even when nothing makes sense. Guts continues, not as a perfect example, but as a brutal reminder, to exist despite pain is already an act of courage, and sometimes that courage, silent and unseen, is more than enough.